So here, can you see this picture?
I can't see it. I can see it.
You can see it now. Okay, good. So we're going to talk about glucose homeostasis today. Yesterday, we talked about osmoregulation, water homeostasis, sodium homeostasis, and potassium homeostasis. And then we also talked about, yesterday was just water and sodium we talked about. And we said that the hormone responsible for the homeostasis of water is called what?
It is ADH, anti-diuretic hormone.
Antidiuretic hormone
Diuretic hormone.
or vasopressin, yes?
Vasopressin, yes.
Okay, and the hormone responsible for the homeostasis of sodium and potassium ion is called?
Is aldosterone.
Aldosterone. Okay.
Yes, sir.
There is another hormone that also plays a role in sodium homeostasis. But that hormone helps with the excretion of sodium in urine instead of reabsorption.
Okay, is natriuretic peptide.
Good. Atrial natriuretic.
Natriuretic.
So it is ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide. And where is that hormone produced?
In the heart.
Where is vasopressin produced?
Is in the hypothalamus, the bioelectric gland, the posterior side.
The name of the gland is pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland in the posterior side.
Pituitary gland produced in the hypothalamus and stored in the pituitary gland. Okay, and then the other hormone, aldosterone, is produced where?
In the in the cortex, the adrenal cortex.
Adrenal cortex. So is the cortex of the adrenal gland.
Gland.
Another name for adrenal gland is suprarenal gland because it's above the kidney. Kidney is renal, renal added to the kidney, or suprarenal on top of the kidney. That's where the gland is. So the cortex of that gland produces aldosterone. Later, when we look at the anatomy of the adrenal gland, you will realize that the cortex itself is divided into 3 layers. We have the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. So there are 3 layers that make up the cortex of the adrenal gland. And then we have the medulla. But we'll look at that later. And each of these 3 layers and the cortex produce different hormones. Okay, and one of them is the aldosterone. Okay, so we also talked about the movement of sodium ions and potassium ions. In what direction does sodium ions move? And what will happen to potassium if sodium moves in that direction?
If sodium is reduced and potassium increase.
Okay, so
yeah.
When sodium leaves the extracellular fluid into the nephron, for example, potassium will leave the nephron into the extracellular fluid, into the blood. Yeah?
Yes.
And vice versa. Okay, good. Now, what is the effector for water homeostasis?
And the effector is the kidney.
The kidney, okay. What is the effector for sodium homeostasis?
The effector is the kidney too.
Okay, so what is the controller for water homeostasis?
The controller is the brain. The yeah, is the brain.
Okay, then the receptors are found
In the hypothalamus.
hypothalamus, the small receptors. Okay, good. Now, quickly today, let's start with the glucose homeostasis in the blood. Now, you know that when you eat carbohydrate food and there is digestion of the food, the end product of that carbohydrate digestion is glucose, right?
Mm.
Sometimes, even if you get fructose and lactose and galactose, all of them are later converted to glucose, which the body uses. Now, that glucose is needed by the body to be able to generate energy because that glucose comes in contact with oxygen. Yeah, when you do respiration, yeah, glucose comes in contact with oxygen, and you produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So that energy is ATP, yeah, and then also triphosphate. So it means that glucose, the reason why we take carbohydrate food is to get glucose. And what does glucose do? Glucose gives us energy. But that glucose cannot just give us energy unless it undergoes metabolism. So it comes in contact with oxygen in the blood, and then a reaction takes place, and you produce carbon dioxide and water and ATP, which is the energy. But there is a certain amount of glucose that the body needs. The normal amount of glucose that the body needs is between 90 and 92 milligrams per mole. From this diagram, we can say 90 milligrams per mole. That is the normal amount of glucose in the blood. Now, in millimoles, it is around 5, between 3.3 to 5.5 millimoles. That is the normal amount of glucose in the blood, between 3.3 to 5
Millimoles.
millimoles, yes. So 3.3 to 5.5 millimoles. But in milligrams, it is 90 milligrams. Yeah, good.
Yes, sir.
So 90 milligrams. Now, if that value, that amount of glucose rises above 100, for example, if it goes to 120 milligrams per mole, right, we
Mm.
have what is called hyperglycemia. So when the blood glucose level increases above 100, yeah, goes to 102, 105, 110, where it is called hyperglycemia because it is higher than the normal amount. Okay. Then when it decreases, when it falls, you know, below 80, when it falls below 80, you have what is called hypoglycemia. So what it simply means is that increase in blood glucose is hyperglycemia, decrease in blood glucose is hypoglycemia. And when you have excess glucose or when you have hyperglycemia, it could be dangerous because it could lead to what we call diabetes mellitus if there is no proper homeostatic mechanism to bring it back to the normal amount. At the same time, if you have hypoglycemia, which is low glucose level, it is also dangerous because it could lead to coma. You have what is called hypoglycemic coma. Why will you have that? Because without glucose, there is no energy. So if your blood glucose level falls so low, if it falls to say 100 or 60 milligrams per mole, it means that your cells, all your tissues, cannot get enough energy. Why? Because they get energy from glucose. And when your cells cannot get energy, they cannot do anything. You know, your cells cannot function without energy. So it means that you could go into a state of coma, and all your cells will be in a kind of starvation because they are not getting energy. So both hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia is dangerous. Both of them are dangerous. So we need to maintain a steady state of glucose, a steady amount of glucose. That is why we need glucose homeostasis. You know that sometimes when athletes run race 1,500 meters, you know, at the end of the race, they faint. Yes, because
Yeah.
they've used up all their glucose. They don't have enough energy, you know, because they've done a very severe exercise. And while they were doing that exercise, all their glucose was used up, you know, and so they get to faint. And the amount of oxygen that is circulating around also is not enough for them because of the kind of exercise that they're doing. So the same thing happens when you, even if you're not doing exercise, but you are lacking glucose, you have hypoglycemia, you could also you could faint also. So both the athletes who had normal glucose level, but because of the exercise, the glucose level dropped. All the glucose was used up. So, and the body could not compensate fast enough. So the athlete fails. The same thing happens to somebody who is not an athlete, but who probably has not eaten carbohydrate food for some time and is lacking glucose. The person could also faint. So now, what organs in the body now play a role in the homeostasis of glucose to make sure that the amount of glucose in the blood is kept at the normal level? Now, if you look at this picture here in the middle, you see homeostasis, blood glucose level about 90 milligrams per mole. Yeah, here. So this is normal amount of glucose. Now, if blood glucose level rises, this becomes a stimulus, yes? And once the blood glucose level rises, and the body detects that the amount of glucose has risen maybe to 120 milligrams per mole, or more than 10 millimoles per liter, if we are using millimoles per liter. You know, we said for millimoles per liter, the normal amount is 3.3 to 5.5. So when it goes above 10, that is severe hyperglycemia. So there's a rise in it. But if you want to use 90 milligrams per mole, when it goes above 120 or above 100, there's hyperglycemia. And so the body detects that there is hyperglycemia, which is hyper means increase, glycemia means glucose, glyce means glucose, emia means blood. So hyperglycemia, high glucose level in the blood. Now, we have an organ called the pancreas. So this is the organ here, pancreas. Now, this organ called pancreas, the pancreas has two group of cells, or it has a structure that is called the islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans. You may want to write that down. There is a part of the pancreas that is called the islets of Langerhans. You should write that down somewhere.
So can you write it?
Yes, yeah. I'm looking for the charts now so that I can type it there. Where is the charts? Okay, yeah. Good. So this is islets of Langerhans. Islet of Langerhans. So this islet of Langerhans is the structure within the pancreas that produces different type of hormones. It actually, this islet of Langerhans has some kind of cells. The two major kind of cells are the alpha cells and the beta cells. So in the pancreas, you find the islet of Langerhans. In the islet of Langerhans, you find the alpha cells and the beta cells. There are also other type of cells, okay? You have the PP cell and delta cell, but we don't need them in glucose metabolism. So the two cells we need for glucose homeostasis are the alpha cells and the beta cells. Now, the alpha cells of the islet of Langerhans secrete a hormone that is called glucagon. 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 So the islet of Langerhans has alpha cells, and the alpha cells secrete glucagon, while the beta cells secrete insulin. Beta cells secrete insulin. So I repeat that again. The alpha cells of the islet of Langerhans secrete glucagon, while the beta cells secrete insulin. Now, I'm going to tell you the function of the insulin and the glucagon. But let's start with that of insulin. So we said that this is normal blood glucose, and then there was an increase in the blood glucose, probably because you eat too much carbohydrates. You love to eat a lot of sweet things. So you have hyperglycemia. And then your pancreas detects that there is increase in blood glucose level, and then causes the beta cells to release insulin. So what will insulin do? Insulin is going to try to reduce the amount of glucose in the blood. So insulin will act to reduce the blood glucose level. Insulin will try to combat that hyperglycemia to normal glucose level. But the question is, how does insulin do that? Now, insulin does two things. One, insulin causes the conversion of that excess glucose into what we call glycogen. Insulin causes the conversion of glucose to glycogen. Remember, we said that it is the amount of blood glucose that is high, hyperglycemia. So insulin now we convert the excess of that glucose into what we call glycogen, and that glycogen is stored in the liver. So here you can see the liver. So insulin causes glucose to be converted to glycogen. This is glycogen, which is stored in the liver. So the excess glucose has left the blood. Now it is in the liver, but in the form called glycogen. Okay? Good. Now, the second thing, by the way, the process of conversion of glucose to glycogen is called glycogenesis. 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 So the conversion of glucose to glycogen is called glycogenesis. Glycogen, genesis means beginning or production. Okay, so glycogenesis. Then the second action of insulin is that insulin causes your body cells to take up more glucose. Remember that this glucose was in the blood. Yes, hyperglycemia was in the blood. So, but that glucose is not supposed to just be in the blood. is supposed to go into your tissues and your cells because that is where it's supposed to be used. Glucose is used by your cells and your tissues to generate energy. But the glucose was in the blood, it was excess in the blood. So insulin now will cause your cells to take up that glucose, that excess glucose in the blood, so that it can be used in the tissues. Remember that in every cell, we have a part that is called mitochondria, yes?
Yes, sir.
So that is the energy house of the cell.
Yeah.
So that is where the glucose is used to be converted to energy or ATP. But without insulin, the glucose will just remain in the blood. It cannot enter into the cell, into the mitochondria to go and produce energy. But now that there is insulin, insulin will cause the cells to open up and take the excess glucose so that that glucose can be used to generate energy for the cells. And when that happens, the amount of blood glucose in the blood now decreases. So the effect of insulin is that blood glucose level declines. Remember, when we started here, we said blood glucose level rises, hyperglycemia.
Yes, sir.
Detected by the body, and the pancreas causes the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans to release insulin. Insulin converts the glucose, this excess glucose, into glycogen, which is stored in the liver by a process called glycogenesis. Glycogen is produced. And then the second action of insulin is that it causes the cells to take up the glucose so that the glucose can be used to generate energy within the cells. And when that happens, the effect is that the blood glucose level now declines, and so it returns to the normal amount of glucose. So this is homeostasis of glucose. Why? Because there was normal amount, normal state, there was an increase in the amount, and then detected by detectors, and signals were sent, causing the release of insulin, and then insulin converts glucose to glycogen in the liver and causes the cells to take up the excess glucose, and then we have blood glucose level declines and returns to the normal amount. So we have maintained a steady state of glucose. Do you understand that?
Sir.
Okay, good. Now, what happens if the blood glucose level falls? Now, imagine that you haven't eaten for 3 days, you are fasting. You will have hypoglycemia, you will have low blood glucose. Or imagine that you did a very tedious exercise and you used up all your glucose. You will have hypoglycemia. Now, that will be detected again, and the pancreas this time around will stimulate the alpha cells, not the beta cells this time, the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans, and will cause the alpha cells to release glucagon. Yes, and once this glucagon is released, the glucagon goes to the liver. All those glycogen that was stored in the liver before, they have to be broken down to glucose now, because now the body needs glucose. So glucagon will cause the liver to break down glucose. And once glucose is broken down, once a glycogen is broken down, it will release what? Glucose. Remember that glycogen was formed from glucose, right? Through glycogenesis. But now you have to break down that
Yes, sir.
glycogen back to
Yeah.
glucose. So the process of breaking down that glycogen back to glucose is controlled by glucagon. And the breakdown of glycogen back to glucose is called glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis. Remember, we said the production of glycogen from glucose,
Glycogenesis.
glycogenesis. So this one, we are breaking down the glycogen back to glucose. It's glycogenolysis. So lysis means breakdown. Glycogenolysis, glycogen breakdown. So when we break down that glycogen, what will happen? It will go back to the glucose that was released from the glycogen goes to the blood to increase the blood glucose level. And so what happens? We now have a normal blood glucose level. So homeostasis has been achieved. A steady state has been achieved. So when you are fasting or you are doing tedious exercise and you have hypoglycemia, this is what happens. It is your glucagon that breaks down the glycogen here and returns it back to glucose so that you can have enough glucose in your blood that can go to your cells to generate energy for your body. So here we have seen what happens when we have hyperglycemia and what happens when we have hypoglycemia. And the goal of this homeostasis is to maintain the blood glucose at 90 milligrams. When it rose to 120, for example, insulin had to function to reduce it and bring it back to normal. When it fell, let's say below 60 milligrams, glucagon has to function to bring it back to normal. Now, there's one other hormone that also plays a role in glucose homeostasis. Now, imagine that somebody has hypoglycemia, very low glucose level, and glucagon has been released. Glucagon has come to the liver to break down this glycogen to release glucose. All the glycogen that was here has been broken down to glucose, but the glucose level is still low in the blood. It is still not enough for the body. So what will the body do? Now the body will do something, which it is not in this diagram, but I'm going to explain it to you. Now, okay, I think they tried to explain it here also. Now, when the glucagon has broken down all the glycogen that is here, and yet the amount of blood glucose is still low, maybe because you starved for too long, or the exercise you are doing is too much, that even though we break down all the glucose from this glycogen, it still is not up to the 90 milligram. It's still not enough for you. So at that time, your body will now look for a way to get glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. Your body will look for a way to get glucose from proteins and fats. Remember that glucose is supposed to come from carbohydrates. But now we have broken down this glycogen that is here, which is the carbohydrate actually. We have broken down the glycogen to glucose, but it's still not enough for the body because it was severe hypoglycemia. But if we don't do something, this person might faint or die, or the cells might begin to die because they don't have enough glucose and energy. So at that time, your body will activate what we call gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis happens in the liver, and not only in the liver. What happens is that non-carbohydrate sources, for example, like lactates, is now broken down to produce glucose. Proteins are now broken down to produce glucose. Fats or lipids are now broken down to produce glucose. So that process is called gluconeogenesis. Why is your body trying to break down lactates to produce glucose, or trying to break proteins and fats to produce glucose? Why?
Because there's not enough glycogen to convert it to glucose, or even though it finishes, it's not enough to increase the blood glucose level.
Good. So now you need gluconeogenesis. But this gluconeogenesis is done by
Sir, where does it goes through a process? So where does it get the lactate, the protein from?
Good. So you have in your muscles, you have proteins in your muscles. Yeah. You have fats under your skin, right? So you have fat deposited in different organs of your body. Okay. So all of these fats are broken down. And that is why um, when you are fasting, you see, if you fast for a long time, you see that you lose weight. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You are losing weight because while you're fasting, you don't have anything in your body. All your glycogen store is empty. There is nothing to break down from glycogen. So your body now starts breaking down your muscles and breaking down fat under your skin. So what happens? You now lose weight. So you are losing weight because all of your proteins and your fats are being broken down into glucose to be able to give you some kind of energy for you to survive. But that is why if you fast for 1 week, for example, you will lose a lot of weight. What is that weight you are losing? You notice that the size of your body reduces, yeah?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Because protein is broken down from your muscles and fat is broken down from your adipose tissue through the process of gluconeogenesis.
Okay.
Do you
Okay.
understand it?
Yes, sir.
Good. So, but the hormone that does this gluconeogenesis is called cortisol. Cortisol.
The what, sir?
The hormone, the hormone responsible for gluconeogenesis is called cortisol. Cortisol. Let me write it somewhere. Cortisol. Cortisol. So you see that your body has almost everything it needs to maintain a steady state. When you need to decrease your blood glucose, insulin functions. When you need to increase your blood glucose, glucagon and cortisol functions. So remember that insulin decreases blood glucose. Don't forget that. Insulin decreases blood glucose, while glucagon and cortisol increases blood glucose. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Good. So let's quickly run through glucose homeostasis again. We have normal blood glucose level, 90 milligrams per mole. There was an increase in the blood glucose level because you like eating a lot of sweet things. Yes, you like sweet mouths. And then the pancreas dictates that there is excess glucose in your blood, which is hyperglycemia. And the islet of Langerhans of that pancreas stimulates the islet of Langerhans is stimulated, the beta cells of the islet of Langerhans is stimulated and causes the release of insulin. And when the beta cells release that insulin into the blood, insulin, which is the hormone, does two things. One, it
Increase the
converts the
conversion
excess
of
glucose
glucose
into
to
glycogen,
glycogen.
right? And
Yeah.
it is stored in the liver. And the second action is that insulin causes your cells to take up glucose. It causes your cells to take up glucose, to use the glucose to generate energy in the mitochondria of the cell. And when that happens, your
The
blood
blood
glucose
glucose
level
level is reduced.
decreases and returns to the normal amounts. The process of converting glucose to glycogen is called glycogenesis. Yes?
Yes,
Good.
sir.
And then on the other hand, when we have low glucose level, which is as a result of fasting or tedious exercise, your beta cells this time, it is the alpha cells, not the beta, the alpha cells of your islet of Langerhans will cause the release of glucagon, and glucagon goes to the liver to break down that glycogen that was stored before through a process called glycogenolysis, and then that increases the blood glucose level and it returns to the normal amounts. But if glycogenolysis happens and the blood glucose could not return to the normal amount, it is still very low, then gluconeogenesis will now be activated. So the liver causes the breakdown of proteins and fats into carbohydrates and the breakdown of lactates also. This is lactic acid, yes, broken down also to glucose, because now we need to get glucose from any other source. We're not waiting for carbohydrate food. We're not waiting to eat carbohydrates. If we have some protein in the muscles, we need to break it down. If we have some fat in the adipose tissue, we need to break it down because it can give us glucose also. Now, and the process is called gluconeogenesis. So the question you should ask is, how come we are able to get glucose from protein? But when we were in primary and secondary school, we were told that when you break down protein, you get amino acid. Yes, after digestion of protein, you get amino acid, and after digestion of fatty food, you get fatty acid. Yeah. So why are we able to break that to get glucose? Because if you look at the structure of lipids or fats, you'll see that fat contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. CHO, right? If you look at the structure of glucose, carbohydrates, it contains CHO also. But if you look at the structure of proteins contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So all of them, both protein, fats, and carbohydrates, they all contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But protein now contains nitrogen also. So it means that inside protein, there's carbohydrates inside. Why? Because carbohydrates is CHO, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Protein is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So protein is just like carbohydrate plus nitrogen. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So that is why you can break down protein and you will find glucose from it. You can break down fat and you will find glucose from it also. Okay, good. Now, this is homeostasis. We maintain this steady amount. But what if something happens to the homeostatic mechanism and there is failure of homeostasis? If there is failure of homeostasis, let's assume that this person has a problem with the pancreas, yes, and this pancreas is not able to release insulin. Let's say the person had pancreectomy, yeah, let's say a part of the person's pancreas was cut away, the endocrine part. The pancreas has two parts, endocrine part, which releases hormones, and exocrine part, which releases digestive enzymes, okay, during digestion. So imagine that this person had a surgery of the pancreas called pancreectomy, and you cut a part of the pancreas, and you cut out the beta cells of this person. What do you think will happen when the person has hyperglycemia? There's no beta cells to release insulin. Yeah. So if the person cannot release insulin, it means that this person will have hyperglycemia, and the hyperglycemia will keep increasing until it becomes diabetes mellitus. So people that have diabetes mellitus now are having problem with insulin. Either the pancreas cannot produce insulin because there is a problem with the pancreas. Maybe this pancreas was cut during surgery, or this pancreas had some kind of autoimmune diseases that destroyed the pancreas, and it cannot release insulin. So that person, it means that the person has lost homeostasis of glucose, and then diabetes mellitus results. So when you share that somebody has diabetes mellitus, it could either be because the pancreas cannot produce insulin, or the pancreas can produce insulin, but the receptors of insulin in the cells do not respond to insulin. When insulin tells the cells to take up glucose, they are not able to take up glucose, or the receptors are blocked by maybe too excess fat or something is blocking the receptors. So glucose cannot enter into the cells. So what happens? We now have excess glucose in the blood. So it is not just hyperglycemia, it becomes diabetes mellitus, because when you have hyperglycemia and more glucose is still being added to the blood, and there's no way to get the glucose out of the blood because insulin is not available, or insulin is not responding to, the receptors are not responding to insulin, then we have diabetes. And that is the pathology. Remember that when we started, I told you that failure to maintain homeostasis leads to pathology. And when we're defining physiology, so physiology is the study of the functions of the organs, yes? But when the organs fail to function, we now have what is called pathophysiology. So we are now studying the cause of the failure of the organ to function. Yeah? So anytime homeostasis fails, there will be a problem. Somebody will get sick. There will be a new kind of disease because there is failure of homeostasis. Okay, so I'm sure you understood glucose metabolism, yeah, or glucose homeostasis. Good. It's very, very important, because if you understand this, you will understand the reason for diabetes, hyperglycemia, hypoglycemic coma, and many other diseases associated with excess glucose in the blood. Okay, good. So let's see if we can do temperature regulation, or I think that might be a whole. I might not be able to explain that in 15 minutes, because temperature regulation is wide. So I might do that in another class. But let's see if we can take some questions from what we've done so far. Let me see if I can get some questions for you. So your first question, which you're going to explain to me, is from the beginning of physiology. Tell me what physiology is. And yeah, go ahead.
Physiology is specific characteristics or mechanism the human body makes that makes the human body function, or it's the branch, or as you said, the branch of medical science that deals with the functions of organs.
That studies the function of organs. Okay, good. Now, what are the different organs, or what is the organizational level of the human body?
The cell, the tissue, the organs, and the system.
Good. Cell, tissue, organs, systems. Now, each of these organs or systems have specific functions, right?
Okay.
So when we study each of these functions, we have what is called physiology. Good. And then we say that all of these cells in the human body are found in what kind of environment? In a fluid environment, yes?
Yeah.
And that fluid environment will have what is called the total body water. So tell me about the amount of water in the human body and the different compartments.
60% of 70 kg. That's equals to 74 liters of water in the body.
74 liters, are you sure?
52 liters. 42, sorry, sir.
42
42
liters.
liters. 42,
Okay.
42.
Okay. So this 42 liters in what compartment? How are they? How
Yeah, divided into two.
Okay.
The intracellular fluid and the extracellular fluid, or the internal environment.
Okay.
And the intracellular fluid is 40% of the 70 kg, and that is 28 liters, or 2 over 3 of water, 28 liters of water.
For
And
intracellular, yeah?
yeah,
You said it's 2
and
over 3, yeah?
yes, sir.
Okay.
And the extracellular fluid is 20% of 70. That's 14 liters of water, or 1 over 3.
Okay.
And the extracellular fluid is divided into two: the interstitial fluid and the plasma.
Okay.
Yeah, the plasma is 0.75 times the extracellular fluid. That is 25% times 14. That's 11 liters, or 3 over 4.
Okay.
The plasma 0.25 times the extracellular fluid volume. Times 5 times 14, that is 3.5, or or 4, 1 over 4.
No, so 3 liters. 3 liters.
Yes, yes, sir.
Because the total is 14, yes? So
Yes,
we
sir.
have 11 liters and 3 liters. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, let me see. There is this question. Let me show you this question. Share my screen. Share screen. Okay. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so look at this first question. A subcompartment of the extracellular fluid. The fluid in the body that directly bathes the cells and tissues is called the dash fluid.
That directly beats the cells.
The cells and tissues.
Is it the interstitial fluid?
Interstitial fluid. Because we said extracellular fluid is divided into two, yes?
True. Yes, sir.
Interstitial fluid and
The plasma. The interstitial fluid is outside,
good.
around the, yeah.
Good. Okay. Second question. The fluid portion of whole blood is referred to as dash.
Plasma.
Plasma. Okay. In an average adult male, 70 kilogram in weight, what is the volume of plasma?
3.5 liters.
Are you sure?
Of 4. It's 3.5.
Okay, but that value that you calculated, that 3 liters you calculated was for total body water. Yes, total body water. It was a certain percentage of the extracellular fluid out of
Oh,
out of the 14 liters. I didn't teach you what the total blood volume was. Okay, total plasma level is. So I'll teach you that in the future. Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I'll teach you that in the future. But that what you are answering now, the question you're answering now is the amount of total body water that is plasma. But this question is asking for the total volume of plasma. Okay. Okay. Plasma comprises total. So this is, I have not taught you this also. I'll teach you this under circulatory system. Okay. So the blood contains plasma and cells. Okay. 55% and 45%. I'm going to teach you that later. Let me see this one. In an average adult male, what's the total volume of blood? Okay, I didn't teach you this. The physical barrier separates the interstitial fluid compartment from the intravascular fluid compartment. The physical barrier separates the interstitial fluid compartment from the intravascular fluid compartment. Intravascular fluid compartment, that's the plasma, the blood vessel, yes? I didn't teach you this also, but I'll teach you later. It's supposed to be, I think they're asking you about the capillaries. Let me see. There's another question I'm looking for, not this one. There's another question I saw. Let me check again. These questions, most of them, you will not be able to answer them. So, just a minute. Q on blood. 1 minute. Okay, I'll send you. Let me see if I can send you the link. There were some questions I saw before. Yeah, okay, share. And share to Skype. I'm going to open the questions on my Skype and share my screen. Share to Skype. Okay. So I'm going to open the questions on my Skype. Okay, share screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this question says, what is the normal osmolarity of the intracellular fluid? Yeah. I didn't teach you that in details. I told you I'm going to teach you osmolarity later. Yes. Okay. What's the normal osmolarity of the extracellular fluid? Okay. What's the normal osmolarity of tissue fluid? What's the normal osmolarity of plasma? Okay. So I think I taught you number 5. So approximately what percentage of total body water is in the extracellular fluid compartment?
20%.
20%? Are you sure? How did you get 20%? We said total body water is 42 liters, yes?
Yes, sir.
And extracellular fluid is how many liters?
It's 14 liters. 0.2 times body weight. That's 20 liters.
Is 14 liters. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So 14 liters is how many percent of 42 liters? So how many percent of 42 liters is 14 liters? That's what you need to do. You need to calculate. What percentage of, now you know total body water, yes? It's
No, 60.
total body water is 42 liters, yes?
42 liters, yes, sir.
So what percentage of 42 liters is 14 liters? So this is mathematics now. Can you calculate it?
83.3.
43.3%.
33.
33.3%. How did you get that?
My calculator.
Okay. So we have 42 liters, yes?
Yes, sir.
So 42 divided by what? So what did you do for you to get that 33?
Over 100.
What you should do is x percent, x over 100 of, that's times 42 is equal to 14. X over 100, x over 100 times 42 is equal to 14. X over 100 times 42 is equal to 14. So you have 42x is equal to 14 times 100, yes?
Yeah.
So 14 times 100 will give you what?
400. 14 times 100 is
1,400, yeah?
1,400.
Divide by 42,
33.3, yeah.
3.3%. Good. So what will be your answer from here now? What is the
B.
closest answer to it?
B.
B. Okay, good. So approximately what percentage of total body water is in the intracellular fluid compartments?
That is 100 minus 35. 65.
65%. Good. Approximately what percentage of total body water is in the intravascular? So intravascular is plasma, yes?
Okay.
Of total body water, remember.
5. I think 5%.
Okay, you're sure it's 5%?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's see how you got 5% because the volume of plasma was 3 liters. Was it 3 liters you got?
3.5 liters.
It's supposed to be 3 liters.
Yeah.
3 liters, yeah? And so 3 liters is 5% of 42. That's what you're saying. Because total body water is 42 liters. So you do the same thing again. X, yeah, over X times 42 over 100 is equal to 3. So 3 times 100 will give you 300, yes? Divided by 42. What did you get?
X times 42
Let me
is
do
equals to
it in my calculator. So we are saying what percentage of of total body water. So X over 100.
7.1.
What did you get?
7.1.
7.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
So 42%, 42% of 3.
Okay, 42% of 3.
That is 7.1. 7.14.
No, I don't think so. So we have
X times 42 over 100 is equals to 3, right?
no. X times 42 over 100, yeah, is equal to 3. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's 7.1.
7 points. Okay. 0.1.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in percentage, which of these will give you 7.1? Which of these percentage will give you 7.1? If you do 5, 10?
10 or 10 or 5.
No, it will not give you 5%, will not give you 7.1. It will not give you that. Approximately what percentage of total body water is in the intravascular fluid compartment? It shouldn't be. Maybe the question they wanted to ask you was what percentage of extracellular fluid is in the intravascular fluid compartment. So what percentage of 28, not 28, what percentage of 14 liters, yes? What percentage of 14 liters is in intravascular fluid compartment? Maybe that was what they wanted to ask. But let's see. I think you can check. Okay, let's see the other question. We'll check the answer. Plasma comprises approximately % of total body water. This is a repetition, seems like a repetition of the other question. In an average adult female, approximately what percentage of the total body water is composed of water? In an adult female, 55 kg in weight, approximately what percentage of the total body water is composed of water? You know, we said the total body water for a 70 kilogram is 60% of body weight.
60%. Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you do 60% of body weight, which is 70, you get 42 liters. But this person is 55 kg. Yeah. Let's see. In an average adult male, 70 kg, what percent of the total body weight is composed of water? 60%. Okay, good. So I think it's the same question, but that one, the person is 55.
Also,
So let's check your answers. So what is the normal osmolarity? I said I've not taught you this, yes? So 300 for intracellular, extracellular, and interstitial fluid. And plasma osmolarity is the same. Good. So approximately what percentage of total body water is 35%? Yeah, we got that. And the other one 65%. Approximately what percentage of total body water is intravascular fluid? Okay, 5% from the calculation. So these two is the same question. Yeah. Approximately what percent? Plasma comprises approximately 5% of total body water. Yes. In an average adult female, what percentage of the total body weight is composed of water? 50%. And this one, 60%. So for 70 kilogram man is 60%. For 55 kilogram man is 50%. But I think it's an approximation they did. Yeah, good. So your calculation was correct. 5%, 5%, 65, 65. So remember osmolarity, yes, is 300 milliosmol per liter. And it is the same osmolarity for intracellular, extracellular, and interstitial fluid. Maybe we'll do it later in the future. Good. So in the next class, we'll do, next week we're supposed to do anatomy. We'll do anatomy next week. And then when we resume physiology, we'll do temperature regulation and then move on to other topics in physiology. Good. Do you have any question?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, what's your question?
I don't have any question.
Oh, you don't have any question?
Okay.
Okay, good. So we'll see on Thursday. We'll see on Thursday. Okay, take care.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, bye-bye.